This is Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and today my guest is Kate McKenzie, here in real life with me.
Hooray for that.
Yes, not online. So before I introduce Kate, I'll share that in the spirit of reconciliation, it's important for me to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land where I live, work, and record from is the traditional territories of the Black Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And so Kate, well, before I read your bio, I'll say that we met here and I feel like I had a fast connection.
Absolutely. I mean, I walked into Madam Premier and I was like, already, yes, this is my place. And then you and I think bonded over kids, which is always a great place. And all the things that go terribly wrong when you're trying to have kids in your life.
100%. But you're also the co-director and executive producer of The Secret Marathon, which is what we're going to be talking about, a documentary film that shares the story of the first female marathon runners in Afghanistan. You are also the co-founder of The Secret 3K, an annual run-walk event held on International Women's Day, which supports every person's right to run freely. And incredibly, this event is now hosted across Canada and in 27 countries around the world. And you are the owner and director of Ayla Consulting, having coached over 400 business people toward growth goals. And you have a master's in digital media and a BA in education. You're also a published author and a professional speaker and a mom. And it's like
way too many things on there.
No, women are multi-hyphenates.
That's true. That's really true.
There's show me a woman, a mom who only has one title.
Oh, we all wear so many hats, right?
100%. Yeah. Okay. So tell me about The Secret Marathon and how this came to be.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having this conversation. I think, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about Secret Marathon because for me, it's meeting these women absolutely changed my life. And I see the impact that it's had on so many other people. And it's, had this momentum that I could have never expected. And so I guess it all started when I heard a story. I heard a story from a fellow named Martin Parnell, who is this incredible, legendary marathoner here in Calgary area. So he had ran 500 marathons in 1 year.
Oh.
I got that wrong. 250 marathons all in 1 year. 500 it's still a lot. It's still a lot. And Martin did it all to raise money for charity. And I thought that was absolutely incredible. I'd read his book. I saw him across the room and I thought, I want to go over and meet this guy. He's the author of the book I just read. But there's always those moments, right, where you're about to meet someone that you have set maybe on this bit of a pedestal and you don't know how it's going to go, right?
Yeah.
And I was feeling like a total fangirl, not sure how that was all going to go down. Yeah. But I took that first step. I walked across the room to go introduce myself. And I mention that because I think a lot of times we're only like a couple steps away from meeting someone that's going to absolutely change the trajectory of our life or being introduced to someone who's going to blow our minds and help us think differently. And certainly that's what my conversation with Martin did. So I came over, started chatting with him, and he told me, Kate, I've actually been looking for a filmmaker. Oh, tell me more, Martin. And he turned out to be great. I loved it. We really hit it off. And so we ended up going for a coffee and he's told me the story, this young woman named Zainab. And Zainab was living in Afghanistan. She wanted to compete in Afghanistan's first ever marathon. And this was going to be the first sporting event in Afghanistan that was to be co-gender. So both men and women competing alongside each other. Before this event, that had never happened before. And so it was really monumentous, but it was also an opportunity for women to be able to run outside. And so she was training for this event, but for her, when she was training, when she wanted to go for a run outside, like you or I might do any day of the week, it wasn't just about, lacing up her shoes and heading out the door. She had to think about a lot of other things because as she started going for her run outside, people were throwing rocks at her. They were verbally assaulting her. They were even sending messages to her on her phone from terrorist organizations, threatening her and her family just for going for a run. Like, she was not doing anything other than that. She was dressed modestly. She was doing all of the things she could within her power to do this. And yet she couldn't exercise that simple freedom of going for a run. And I don't know about you, but for me, like if people were throwing rocks at me, Sarah, when I went for a run, like that would be it. I'd be like, new sport, I'm done. I'm out of here. Right. And for Zainab, that did not deter her. That was not the breaking point. She really saw this as being something about much larger than running, about being something that was about, creating spaces for women and girls to be able to move their bodies, to be in the public commons, and to be able to express themselves.
To have a body.
To have, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so she kept on training, and she was training in this sort of like enclosed courtyard in front of her home that was with really high walls, so no one could see her. She was running on loops. And Martin told me about this woman and that she's just running in loops. And it takes about 800 kilometers worth of running to be able to train for a marathon. And I just could not get this image of this woman running in loops over and over and over again, so determined, so resilient to meet her goal. And so Martin told me, Kate, I'm planning to go over. I want to support these women that are running in the second ever marathon of Afghanistan. I want to support them however I can. I've done 250 marathons. I've since done even more. Maybe I can help with any of the coaching needs that they might have, because there's not a huge access to coaches there, right? Maybe I can just help by just running alongside them, give them some encouragement, like whatever they're needing, I want to go and support. And he said, so I'm thinking of going over. I'm going to film some stuff on my phone and on my GoPro. Would you be willing to patch it together? It's like, oh my gosh, part of this story is incredible. You cannot film this on your phone. Like, I know phone technology has come a long way, but this is like, I think we could do better than that, And so I asked him, would it be all right if I joined you? Right. I'd love to.
And what year is this?
So this is in 2016.
Okay.
2016. And it was going to have to be a really quick turnaround. So I started chatting with Martin in it would have been around like May, June of that year.
Right.
And it was going to be end of October that we would be going over to film.
Okay.
So super fast. Just even trying to get our visas was challenging. Every single step of the way was challenging. And
you were traveling.
So I was traveling by myself, but I did have a crew of two. So I had a film crew. So two wonderful guys that came with me. And so we had a very small film crew, and we did that intentionally, right? We wanted to make sure that if things shifted suddenly, we could get up and go really quick. We also needed to have people that were comfortable to take on any of the particular roles, because sometimes there were spaces we'd be going into where it wasn't considered culturally appropriate for a woman to be doing the filming or asking the questions, or vice versa, where we'd go into female dominated spaces where it's not appropriate for the men to come in. And so we all had to kind of be able to wear all of the hats. And I had to find people that were willing to go over with me to Afghanistan. And so it was that really narrows your talent pool quite a lot. And so I was so grateful to have these two friends that came with me and that helped to make this possible, and really a whole team of people that made it possible, because this thing from its very inception has been people coming together, forming the community to help us share this story, and people that got on board and believed in it. And so, my co-director, Scott Townsend, and, as well as Colin and Liam, who came over, but then all the people that supported us, because we couldn't actually tell anyone about the film we were making. It all had to be kept a secret. So we couldn't make a website. We couldn't do all the things that normally documentarians do to try to, get funds to be able to go over and do this. We just had to go to people one at a time and ask them, hey, would you come? Would you help us? Would you help us make this a reality?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. Having been to Iran, I can imagine to some degree some of the logistics of it, and dealing with a government that is not necessarily open and welcoming. That would be really tricky. And did you also have any thoughts running through your mind? Like, what if this goes sideways? And, what if, I end up being taken into custody, or any of us.
Absolutely. So, I mean, at the time that we were there in 2016 was considerably safer than it would be to go over there now. Now, that being said, it was still absolutely a war zone at the time that we went there. Now, we were traveling to a safer region of Afghanistan. So we spent the majority of our time in Bamyan, which has generally been a space that was undesirable politically or economically. So it was relatively left out of some of the conflict. It's not Kandahar, right? And so it's been left. It had experienced more peace during that time, right? Less conflict, I should say. That being said, there was a huge amount of internally displaced people that were living there, and other impacts, other effects of war, right? But we spent a majority of our time in Bamyan and in Kabul, and so that did make a difference. That being said, absolutely, we had to take into consideration all of the risks. And for myself, bringing over a team meant I had to look at my team members' families and say, I'm going to do my absolute best to bring your loved one home safely. That's a huge responsibility. I can remember when we finally got back on the plane to leave Afghanistan, and as we were leaving Afghan airspace, I was like, right, this is...
Oh, I have the same. I've experienced the same feeling, because up until that moment, you're fair game.
You are, and you're responsible, right? And I mean, we had some great help in terms of being able to navigate some of those risks. And so, we worked with an incredible organization called Untamed Borders, who helped navigate a lot of our travel, who helped make sure that the way we got from point A to point B was safe, that we were checking off crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's at every point along the way to help reduce our risk. And we also had long conversations with insurance companies beforehand. Even just finding insurance was really challenging.
Never time.
Right. But we had to get because I was bringing other people over there, right?
Yeah.
We had to get insurance for all sorts of crazy things that I've never had to consider before, like terrorism insurance, kidnapping insurance, all of these crazy things, and other ones that are just horrendous, right? And you never want to think about those pieces. But of course, you do have to have a plan going in. On the other side too, I think it was really important for us to work with the community to help us show up in the best possible way that we could. So from the get-go,
to build trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to just not show up and do something really stupid, without knowing it, right? And so from the very beginning, we worked with Afghan cultural advisors, both in Afghanistan and ones living here, to be able to help inform the documentary, to make sure that we were being as sensitive as we could be. We chatted with folks that we were hoping to interview in advance to start building relationship. And one of the coolest things I got to do was to meet with a group called the Calgary Muslim Marathoners, who welcomed me into their home, Sarah, and, helped tell me all of the things I needed to know about how I could wear hijab and run a marathon at the same time. And so this actually was going to be my first.
Did you run
it? I did. This is my first ever marathon.
Oh,
and
wow.
I ran it in Afghanistan. Yeah. I don't know that's what I would recommend to most people trying to do their first marathon, but for me, it was important to kind of understand some of what these women were going through and to be able to have that perspective. And so I was running and I had all my film equipment on me, and my film crew was also going up and down the marathon route. And that was part of how we captured this experience. But I needed to know, how do I dress appropriately? Yeah. What do I do? And so they gave me tons of really great advice. They even gifted me the headscarf that you'll see me wearing in the film, so that I could know that it wasn't going to come off. It was going to stay secure, that was one less thing I needed to worry about. Right. And so I think all along, we just had this amazing community that's been so supportive.
And so going back to Zainab.
Yeah.
Was she on board with this idea from the beginning?
Yeah. So Zainab has been amazing throughout this whole experience. And she and I are still in contact now, even it's, been so many years later.
Is she still in it?
So, when we went over to actually do the film, we were hoping that Zainab was going to be one of our main characters in the film. Right. But it was not safe for her to be able to travel to the marathon site at the time that we were there. And so we lost our main character, and we had to actually look for other women and that we could include in the film. And so that was a huge challenge. And, and then when we got back after filming, we were almost a full year into post-production at the point where the film was about 80% complete. And one of the gals that we had interviewed in place of Zainab let us know that she was facing an escalation in threats to both herself and her family. And she no longer felt like she should be part of the film. And this was this hugely pivotal point in the film, because I think for a lot of filmmakers and for, in a typical documentary space, once you've got the footage, you say, like, that's it. Yeah. Like, you've signed away your rights, you're done. But that's not how I want to do film. That's not how my team wanted to do film. We want to be respectful of people. We want,
because it could be. Yes.
It will. There's huge repercussions. Yeah. Absolutely. Right.
It's not just, I don't like my hair on the day.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I didn't like what I said. I'm going to have to change a part. Like it is a matter of life and death.
It absolutely is. And I think though too, it's also not just about her. It's about how people in that region will see film, will see storytelling. Is this a space in which they are respected and treated with dignity? Is it a space in which we tell stories with people, or where we tell stories about people? And that's a very small distinction, but a very important one to me, is that I always want to tell stories with people.
Because it's with consent.
With consent. Absolutely. And so when she told us what was happening for her, we said, okay, we're going to pull everything.
Wow.
And it left these huge gaps in our film. And so then as a team, we had to say, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to kind of like patch this together? Or are we going to try and get creative and come up with a new solution? Now, that means going back into production. That means we don't have additional funds. So that means asking everyone, do you want to keep working, knowing that now you're basically volunteering at this stage. And every single person on our crew came back and said, yes, we still want to keep going. We want to come up with a new solution. We want to make this film the best that it can be. And I give huge kudos to everyone, because we were working with people that are extremely talented, that have gone on to do incredible things. And they gave of their time, they gave of their talents in an industry where that is very challenging to do, because we're also taking them away from other projects they might have been working on. And they did it because they believed in what this topic was all about. And so we pulled all of that footage out, and in its place, we actually worked with our Afghan cultural advisors to create an animated story that featured this sort of every woman character that would tell the story of many of the Afghan women we interviewed when we were over there, compiled together to represent what would this be like for the average Afghan woman if she were to try to compete in the marathon? What would that look like? And so in the end, I think we ended up with something really innovative that we wouldn't have had otherwise, where there's this unique story, this animation piece that blends through the live action, and you get to see different types of stories of different types of people. And it truly is reflective of what we heard from so many folks, but in a safe way. And that's exactly it. And so I share all that because your question was, well, what happened with Zainab? Because Zainab's still in the film. There's still some footage about her, and she continued to go on to work with supporting women's rights and girls' rights in Afghanistan. And she's been very visible, very vocal. And so when the Taliban retook Afghanistan, she was in immediate danger, because she would be someone that would be targeted as being a leader in this space. And so she thankfully was able to get evacuated quickly with thanks to some of the NGOs that she was working with at the time. They were able to get her and her family out. She has a young daughter that is very similar age to my little girl. And so I can't even imagine trying to just overnight uphaul all of your family and be displaced, trying to get out of, your country that's completely imploding, no access to any of your savings, no access to bring anything with you other than like a backpack of
Not even
stuff.
saying goodbye, right?
No,
Because you have to go now.
just up and going.
Yeah.
And then, they ended up getting, brought over to the US. But even then, you're rebuilding your whole life. You spend a whole bunch of time just in a military base while they screen you for all sorts of things and while they wait to set up all of the things. And that's incredibly challenging, incredibly difficult. And this is happening to her because she spoke up about women's rights to move, women's rights to education, things that every woman should be able to have access to.
Well, it's something that I think most women in North America and the Western world can take completely for granted.
Yeah.
Because we have the ability to say what we want, when we want, how we want.
Absolutely.
With, there are obviously consequences to what you say, but not consequences in terms of, having to flee your country because of it.
Yeah.
We have such enormous privilege, which we, in my opinion, fail to take into consideration. It's a completely different thing.
I agree. And I think what we saw come out of this was that other women also resonate in that same way that you are, Sarah, saying like, okay, maybe I'm not actually recognizing the rights that I do have.
Yeah.
And now that I've seen that, how do I do that? And so, I really encourage people like, watch the film because it's just super inspiring. Like this is, if you're having a bad day, watch what these women are doing. It still inspires me. And I don't even know how many times I've watched it now.
Right?
Yeah.
What I consider to be a bad day or a bad struggle, right? I'm
Absolutely.
not running behind an enclosed courtyard because people are going to throw rocks at me and tell me, that I'm, I won't say the words adversity, but, that I won't, there's risks. And to be fair, there are risks to being a woman in Western societies as well.
Yes.
But it is not the same.
It's not. And yet some of the solutions I think that we saw in Afghanistan are solutions that we can implement here in North America. And so that got me really excited, is that what we saw happening in Afghanistan, yes, there's these inspiring women that are taking these courageous steps, but also there's this huge community of people that were coming together to host the marathon, both men and women, right? And so it's a huge act of courage to say, we're going to have a co-gender event. The two race organizers are both male, and they were the ones that identified this is something that we need, right? Absolutely. And so I think that's really cool. And what we saw of that creating a safe race could also help to create a safe place. So for many of these women and girls, this will be the only time that they could run safely outside. And it was happening because of an event. But then that event piques people's curiosity and their interest to say, well, if we could do this in this one place, why couldn't we do this in other places? Or why couldn't this be more reflective of what we see on the daily basis in our communities? And so, when we came back to Canada and we were finally able to talk about the film, and be able to share about what we'd been doing. I heard from so many folks here that said, that's interesting. This is not exactly my situation, but I don't always feel safe to go for a run. I don't always feel safe to go for a walk. And people were telling us, I don't feel safe to do that at night or in certain neighborhoods, or if I'm by myself, or if I'm, with my partner. We heard a lot of that from the queer community, or if I am dressed in a certain way, or even as a person of color, we saw what was happening at that time too, especially in the US of, runners who had been attacked, and murdered. Absolutely. And so, these issues are still happening here in North America. And so, that was kind of on my mind. And I ran into this fellow, John Stanton, who is the owner of Running Room, is running apparel stores all across North America. And he and I started chatting, and I was like, I'd love to just have a race where we could, bring together in the same way that we saw this work in Afghanistan, people coming together, one day out of the year, and be able to show this is how we could run safely together at night. Like we could do this, and we need to do it by coming together, by creating that community. And John said, that's that's great. I love it. But we should do it in 10 cities all on the same night, all across Canada. I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But, I'm going to need your help. Right. And so to his credit, John and the running room team absolutely stepped up to the plate. We worked with another charity called Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. And this was the foundation of what became the Secret 3K, which is now in going into its 6th annual year, where it's been held across Canada, now in 27 countries around the world, where women and allies are coming together to say, we believe that everyone should have the right to move. And so I think this is also an action step, is saying, we need to come together. We need to claim those spaces. We need to be able to get ourselves out and then have the conversation, right? So we always host this during the week of International Women's Day. And it's incredible to see people coming together, families coming together, and having conversations about consent, having conversations about gender equity while they're on a walk or run. And so I feel like there's just been huge awareness raised, but also funds raised. So we've raised now over $100,000 that has gone back to helping women and girls be able to access running, whether that is in Afghanistan or around the world. And I think this is how we take those next steps, right? Is we share the stories that we hear of what's working, what's going well. And so I encourage people, watch the film, go see the Secret Marathon. We've released it publicly. You can find it at secretmarathon.com or go onto Vimeo and search the Secret Marathon and see the film, get inspired, but then share it with someone else. Encourage them to come out with you and run walk, during Secret 3K, but then don't stop there, right? Keep having these conversations, keep looking for charities that you can support. I mean, I'm a big fan of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. That's been a group that we've supported through the Secret 3K, as well as 261 Fearless, who creates running clubs for women and girls all around the world. But there are many organizations doing incredible things to support women and girls. And I think we need to start putting our money where our mouth is and start getting engaged, start getting involved.
Yeah. And stop taking your rights for granted.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I know that there's a lot of folks that are listening to this that are already engaged, that are already active, and are some of the people that are championing, their political leaders. And I think I know that is making a difference. We just saw the passing of, Bill C-41 that makes it easier for aid to be going into Afghanistan. Not easier, but we're making some headway, but there's still so much work to be done. I mean, women and girls in Afghanistan that are 12 years and older do not have access to education. So since the Taliban came in, if you are 12 and you are a girl, you don't get to go to school anymore.
So just yesterday, this week, they announced that women's hair salons are closing. So, and having experienced a hair salon in Iran, I can imagine it's somewhat similar. So it's a safe space because men are not allowed in them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the few places where women can be whoever they are, their true selves. You don't have to wear a hijab.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have that element of it. And, you can do your hair and put on makeup and not have to wear, a chador or a manteau. And I can't imagine, because it's just been this erosion, right? It was an immediate cutback of women's rights. And it's been this slow degradation of just taking everything away from them because they aren't, seen as, equal in any sort of way. And, what will be left of women, it's really hard to comprehend and to make sense of, and it's so upsetting.
And I think for those that are in this political space, I think continuing to advocate for the need for women and girls to be at the table when we're having these conversations, when we're having conversations about in conflict zones, when we're having conversations about how will we operate, how will we move forward? Because I think right now, there's a dangerous shift that's happening where we're starting to say, okay, well, how do we work with the Taliban? And I understand where that is coming from, that people do want to get just basic human aid to Afghans. And I see the need for that. Absolutely. Unfortunately, not everyone was able to get out like Zainab. And we still know folks that are still there and in hiding who don't even have access to like fuel to keep their homes warm or to basic food and water, right? And so, yes, we need that. But I think we also have to remember that this is a regime that is creating an apartheid against women and girls. They are creating a second class of people, and people that are not receiving the same rights. And these are basic human rights, the right to education and the right to being able to be in public spaces. So women and girls cannot go into parks. They cannot go into gyms. They cannot be leaders of NGOs. We're starting to erode that. Now, I don't want to leave this all gloom and doom, because there's also people that are doing incredible things. So the organization I've mentioned earlier, Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, one of the coolest things that they've been doing is actually working with Afghan female teachers who were dismissed when the Taliban came in, and empowering them to be able to teach virtual classes to women and girls across Afghanistan. And so many Afghans actually have access to Wi-Fi through their cell phones. Cell phone coverage is like everywhere, which is really cool. And so many women and girls, that's how they're continuing their education, is online. And I think is this a perfect solution? Is this the end?
But it is,
No, but it
right
is
now.
something, right? And so I think it's, how do we get creative? How do we look for ways to continue to support, Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan is also looking for opportunities to help assist women and girls that want to continue their studies elsewhere so that they're not stuck, right? And so I think we need to look for those pieces as well.
Yeah, I think that the Taliban wants, obviously not. The Taliban intends to make Afghan women, invisible. I think what Canadian women can do is to remember them and to make them visible, however that may be. So by watching the marathon or the secret marathon, or just having an awareness that these women continue to exist, despite every best effort by the Taliban to, erase them. And that there is a duty to remember them, not only in the context of, when we're, trying to ensure abortion as healthcare in America, and potentially here in Canada at some point, if that ever happens, or, thinking about gender equality and, equality for trans folks and the LGBT community, but also maybe even the Afghan people who have left, right, that are here, but also remembering the ones that are still there.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the reasons we chose to make our film publicly available now, was that we wanted folks to be able to show it, because one of the biggest things we now need to do is welcome Afghans into our communities. So Canada has become now one of the places that has accepted the most Afghans but yet there's still not enough. And so we're seeing where there's been commitments by the Canadian government to bring over, a certain number of Afghans, and that has not yet been met. And yet we are now, years into this, and we still have not met those targets. And so I think we need to keep advocating that Afghans be let in, and especially that we recognize those who served Canadians, Afghans that risked their lives to be able to help our fellow Canadians to stay safe, translators, drivers, folks that, went out of their way to assist Canadians and are still in Afghanistan, have still not been able to get over, which we need to at least have just on a sheer level of responsibility. We need to make sure that those people are treated well, and that we do everything we can to help them. If they want to come to Canada, if they would like to get out, that we respect that and we assist them in doing so. But also I think we need to create that space where we say refugees are welcome here. Immigrants are welcome here. How do we do that in our communities? How do we welcome people? And we think that, screening the film can be a way to raise awareness in your own community that, hey, these are not scary people. These, Afghans are not, this is not a whole group of people that are terrorists. These are people actually that are extremely resilient, people that are incredibly generous, and ones that will be an important part of our communities. Yeah. So how do we welcome them in? How do we create that safe space?
They're honestly just people.
Yeah.
Right? Their moms, their dads, their sisters, their brothers, their women and men and people, and they're just, the human side of it gets so often missed, especially in the context of, what we see in mainstream in the media around, the extremes that people like to paint. There is a humanity in the culture, and it is very easy to overlook. But it is there. So we need to extend people the same opportunity for safety, for equity and equality and peace that we would want extended to ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that starts right in our own homes. I mean, if you have children and your children have Afghan kids that are in their, in their daycares, in their schools, how can you encourage your child to be welcoming to that child? Because they may or may not speak English. They may need extra supports. They may or may not feel scared when, bombers fly over on Canada Day, because that sounds a lot different to them. And I think we just need to really exercise as much empathy and compassion as we can to be loving towards people that have gone through a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
And to find ways that we can support here. So
the first response, the default right now, I think, is fear, and it needs to be empathy.
Empathy, and I think curiosity. I think that oftentimes when we're scared, we can replace fear with curiosity. And I'm a big proponent for that. Is if something's scary, it's often because we just haven't learned enough about it, and we haven't asked enough questions. And I think people are often open to these questions. We just have to be brave enough to ask them.
Well, I really want to thank you for coming in today and chatting with me. I feel I could talk to you for hours. So again, how do people watch your film?
So you can go to thesecretmarathon.com and you'll find the film there. You'll also find all the making of it and find us on social and all those places. So you can get there from any route that you like. And then I also encourage you, is after you watch the film, go to secret3k.com, sign yourself up and join us next International Women's Day week so that we can all run and walk together.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Kate.
My pleasure. Thank you.